is Nippon from Chiang Mai University. Today, I would like to present you about our system called Fire Elephant, IoT-based smoke detector platform. As we all know, smoke has been a big air pollution problem all over the world. It's caused by the fine particulate matter 2.5 or PM 2.5, which has the size of less than 2.5 microns in diameter. It can cause us both of the short-term and long-term health hazard. So that's not going to be good for human beings at all. In Chiang Mai, this kind of problem has been the seasonal problem, particularly in the dry season from January until April. As you may see here, this is the picture of the city of Chiang Mai in the normal days. And when we have the smoke haze problem, this is what it is. Okay, that's not good at all. So we found out that the main source of this problem for Chiang Mai is from the forest fire. As you may see here, from the map of Thailand, Chiang Mai is up north and it is in the mountainous area. So that is why we have a lot of forest, and that's gonna cause a forest fire, particularly in the dry season. Some may think that if we would like to tackle this kind of problem, we should use a hotspot map from satellite. It is available, but it's going to be too slow to respond or to extinguish the fire. So that's because the fire already widespread. So we cannot control that. Okay, it's going to be extremely hard to control that. So we would like to tackle the problem from the beginning. That is why we came up with the idea of smoke detection system. So we would like to detect the smoke at the beginning, okay, of the fire. So as you may see here, we can use the hotspot map, but it's going to be too slow. In Thailand, we have a unit called Fire Tiger. It is a public spirit local group of volunteers. So they would perform this kind of job to extinguish the forest fire. To help them, we came up with our system called Fire Elephant, because elephant is a symbol of Chiang Mai University. Okay, so we think that we would be a little mechanism to help Fire Tiger. Okay, and this is who we are. Okay, it's a little bit of cute, right? And this is for the Fire Tiger. This is the overview of our system. The smoke detector would detect the smoke and send the signal to our processing unit. This processing unit would process the signal to reduce the false alarms. And after that, the results would be shown on a website. As you can see here, this is the website, okay, and this is our system. As you may see, we use solar cell. And inside here, we also have a charging battery to make sure that our system would work at, in the nighttime as well. So from the map, if that location is green, it means that everything is okay. If it turns gray, it means that it just goes in the sleep mode, okay, and it will wake up a little bit after it gets the sunlight. If the smoke occur, it would turn red and send the signal, the alarm signal, to the operators, okay, to take care of the problem with the location. So in June 2019, about 2.5 years ago, we went to the forest to deploy 200 units of this. And as you may see, we have to work with the people local people to make sure that they understand what's going on, what kind of device that we would put in the forest. And we have to set up the operation center in the village as well. And as you may see, the forest is pretty dense and deep. So we've got to use a lot of volunteers. Okay, and to install our system, we have to put them like 4 meters above the ground to make sure that it would get enough sunlight to activate the whole system. So we have to work with the expert who can climb this kind of trees. Okay, so this is the conclusion of this system. At the beginning, we know that we would have to install our system in the steep slope and the deep forest. So we designed our system so that it would have this kind of characteristics. The first one is that it must be self-sacrificing. So it's going to be ready to be burned down. Okay. The second one is that it's going to be self-power. So we use a solar cell, and we also have the charging battery as well. So we can leave them in the forest for good. And the third one is a self-awakening. So it can sleep when the leaves in the forest came out. And that means it's in the wet condition. And for the dry condition, when the leaves fall down, the system would wake up by itself. Okay, is it good? Yes, right? So from 2019 up until now, we have to wait and see year by year how many of them would wake up, because we will not go back to the forest, okay, in this near future to check the system, but we will check that from our website. So some of the units that we have installed might be gone, okay, from the parts malfunction, or it could be from the change of the forest conditions, right? So that the sunlight might not come to the system or our unit anymore. So it's gonna sleep forever, okay, if that's such a case. And that's gonna be it about it. And lastly, I would like to thank Chiang Mai University, who give us the financial support, and we thank the AIS company that provide us the data communication facility. And also the most important one, we would like to thank the endless great effort from countless of the volunteers who help this project possible. Okay, and that's about it. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Mohammad Azam. I am working as assistant professor in Arid Agriculture University, Rawalpindi in Department of Structure and Environmental Engineering. I'm very thankful to Professor Dr. Jayon Lee for inviting me here on this very prestigious forum. So today the topic of my presentation is about the application of disaster management cycle on flood risk in urban areas of Pakistan. It is just a review of flood risk in urban areas in Pakistan. Well, these are the contents. The first of all is introduction, and then disaster risk paradigm, and then evaluation, and then we will talk about the conventional disaster management cycles. And then we will discuss about how this cycle can be improved in current situation, because now the scenario has been changed completely. The old disaster risk management strategies cannot be applied in recent industrial revolution. So therefore, I think we need to improve our flood risk management strategies in this regard. So first of all is introduction, because the floods in Pakistan has been occurring phenomena around about 43.4% of all disasters from 1998 to 2017. So there is a very high frequency of floods that has been occurring, especially in the urban areas. So major reason of these that kind of floods in urban areas is because of the lack of proper flood risk management strategies, and the very rapidly increase in the population of Pakistan. So therefore, it is extremely hard for the flood risk management authorities to control or to mitigate the flood timely. So Pakistan is very prone to natural disasters as well as the climate related severe occurrences. So Pakistan is lying in the top 10 countries in the world that have been mostly affected by the natural disasters such as the climate change. So this is a conventional way of managing the flood. So disaster risk paradigm. So initially it is based on like preparedness, and then Mitigation and prevention. Then you try to develop things for the response, relief, and rehabilitation. So overall, in context of urban floods, there is a problem such as inappropriate land use strategies in Pakistan. They doesn't properly use their land without planning. Insufficient sewer lines, because sewerage lines supposed to be underground, but here in Pakistan, most of the sewer lines on the surface, So therefore, it is extremely hard for the flood risk management authorities to control the flood because of the clogging in the surface water system. So it is extremely hard to mitigate the climate change. And the evaluation of disaster risk management, if you try to evaluate, there are two pictures here. One is at the top, you can see here. This is a riskier future, when the future is a little bit riskier, a less risky future. The lower picture shows that. So if you talk about the climate, there is a warmer climate. Because of the warm climate, there is a increase in the frequency of floods, increase in the frequency of precipitation. And the second is a sinking coastal land, because of the climate change, the level of water is increasing in the oceans day by day. So therefore, there is a problem of sinking coastal area. Coastal area is sinking day by day. Then environmental degradation. These are the major hazards which Pakistan is facing. Then there is a large population. The population is increasing day by day. There is another problem of how we manage this large population. So more developed hazardous areas, more impervious surface. So if there is an impermeable surface, there is a more development of roads, more development of cities. It means that the water get less time to infiltrate into the soil. They have less place to infiltrate. So therefore, there is a high chances that the flood will occur. So therefore, in order to mitigate these problems, we need to have we need to work on the mitigation of climate change. We need to have the proper urban designing in order to reduce this risk of the flood. Then the proper resource planning. This is very important. Then the managing the urban expansions as well. So if you manage the proper urban expansion, even then you can properly reduce the disaster risk. So these are the most important things, most important factors we need to consider in order to reduce the disaster and risk reduction. And this is a conventional way, the conventional disaster management cycle. First is the flood impact, then you have the response system that responds according to the nature of the flood, and then you have the recovery. Recovery is very important. So if you have the proper recovery system, then of course you can start the development according to the recovery system which you designed. Then prevention, mitigation, and preparedness. This is the disaster management cycle, which is very old. In fact, this is very conventional, so it needs to be improved because now the climate change is one of the factor that has came in Pakistan especially. It has impacted the major cities of Pakistan. So therefore, we need to consider the climate change. But previously in the disaster management cycle, they did not consider this climate change factor. And then the flood risk management systems of Pakistan. So currently in Pakistan is facing a lot of problems related to flood management system, policy and strategy, and flood laws, flood institutions, flood planning, and flood management measures. So currently, Pakistan lacks in the robust flood management laws. There is a problem that they doesn't have the robust management laws. So it needs to be improved. And the third thing is the government is having difficulty in providing the basic services such as drinkable water, which is very important, appropriate hygienes, and the meals, schools, and medical services. These are very important to control the disaster situation. So the Pakistan is still facing these problems, is struggling hard to improve it. So they previously there have been a draft for national water policy which has not been improved and implemented yet. It needs to be improved and implemented, but it has not implemented yet. So this is another problem in the flood risk management system in Pakistan. So here's a methodology that has been adopted. These are the major districts in Pakistan that are facing the flood risk. There's a total 45 districts here that are mainly facing the flood risk. That this picture has been produced by the National Disaster Management. So mostly at the middle part of the Pakistan is a red, completely red. You can see the very high risk of the flood. Why? Because this area is along the Indus River. This area. So because of the Indus River is basically joining at these points. So therefore, these points are relatively having high risk of flood as compared to other areas. So here, this is a Balochistan area where they doesn't have the proper irrigation system. Neither they have the proper rainfall. So therefore, this area is having low flood risk as compared to other areas in Pakistan. Okay, this is a study area. So we have selected overall the three districts: the Rawalpindi, Sialkot, and Muzaffarabad. So if we select these three districts, and then we try to discuss with the councillors, union council, youngsters, government officials. So there are many other government agencies that we have questioned about this flood risk management strategies or issues they are facing in order to reduce the flood. So this is the data. These are the all organizations that we have asked different questions about the flood risk management strategies. And then you can see this is basically the infrastructure of government, how the government works. First, there is a director administration, direct operation, assistant director, and town officer planning. This is actually the overall what you can say the steps overall, and the different officers that have been working in the official government organizations. So we have selected these different institutions in order to ask the question from them. Then we go for the data analysis. These are the different categories that we have categorized in order to analyze the data. In 6 stages: the familiarization with the terms and problem, then categorization and classification codes, evaluation of all themes, and then identifying and changing the themes, and then report creation. These are the steps we followed. So this is a flood risk management challenge. These are the biggest challenges. So that's how we can reduce. In case of structural point of view, there is a problem, there is a challenge that there is a poor embankment in construction. So the embankments are along the canals, they are not properly lined because of the non-alignment of these canals. There is a problem of leakages in the water. There is a problem of water logging because of this reason. Then we have the non-structural, the poor building control, encroachment with the embankments. So these are the problems, structural and non-structural. Then we have the NGOs. And NGOs doesn't trust the government, and government doesn't trust the NGOs. This is another issue. Then we have the institutions. So institutions needs to do not need any protocols. They're supposed to follow the proper methodology to reduce the flood risk. That communities lack of social capital in urban settings. So there is a problem that they doesn't have that much money to reduce the risk of flood. So in institutional challenges also we have the community challenges. So in order to make accommodate this cycle, we need to have proper mitigation, preparedness, rescue relief, and rehabilitation recovery. So these are the things that we damn needed in Pakistan in order to reduce the flood risk challenge. So in case of mitigation, it can be structural measure and it can be non-structural measure. So in case of structural measure, we build the dams, we do the channel modifications, levee, flood proofing, catchment modifications, scheme of drainage and flooding. In case of non-structural cases, we have the schemes of flood forecasting, planning control, question and relocation, and flood insurance, and public information and education. So these are the structural and non-structural things which we can use in order to mitigate the flood. So these are the things that directly link with the land use control measures. And these are also linked with the financial relief and reduction and control measures. Then we have the preparedness, how we can prepare our institutions in order to reduce this flood damage. The first thing is the problem which they are facing, the institutions are facing, is the financial and technological restrictions. These are the major cause of lack of preparedness. And the second biggest cause is that the skilled human resources. We do not have proper skilled human resources in order to prepare the institutional, in order to increase the institutional preparedness. Then we have the community preparedness. The community preparedness need the proper local NGOs. It need the proper management of society and awareness in the society. Then we have different actions and processes that have been enlisted in this publication. We have worked on the both structural and non-structural. So this is mitigation, prevention, and post-disasters. So rehabilitation and recovery. So in case of rehabilitation and recovery, the role of institutions, communities, and NGOs, organizations, in both government and private, can play a critical role in treatment and rehabilitation by providing financial help, construction material, and seasonal employment in the local communities. So these are the most important things for rehabilitation and recovery. So discussion way forward, how we can treat this, how we can increase this by using proper planning. So first thing is a initial risk. We need to check where initial risk is. Then we can do the zonings, like the areas that are more likely to face the problem. We can conduct the zonings. We can have the building codes, risk communication, evacuation plans, natural storage, levees, and then flood proofing, insurance. We can have the insurance in order to reduce the damage at the country level or at the city level. And then conclusion. So presently, the flood mechanism focuses on only flood control. So the climate change has intensified the vulnerability and flood risks. So though the currently a number of flood management and preparedness measures existed in Pakistan, but these measures have not improved the prospect of Pakistan in terms of sound flood management systems. So currently, Pakistan is facing the challenge of lack of comprehensive flood policy, planning and laws, lack of institutional capacity and coordination, and inadequate flood drainage systems. So, as well as we also have the problem in the lack of flood management strategy, integrated flood management strategy. So, we need to improve these areas in Pakistan to have the proper flood management techniques. So another thing is we need to reduce the impact of climate change by designing our hydraulic systems, by noting the monsoon rainfall and frequencies and their intensities, and by constructing the infrastructures according to our requirement. So that's how we can attack the climate change as well. So it's all about my presentation. Thank you so much for listening me and for having me here. And
Chair of the Organizing Committee of the 15th ICCM, and Professor Zhe Yun Lee, Professor An Chen, Professor Norio Okada, members of the President Board, International Society for Crisis and Emergency Management, my colleagues, this is my pleasure to present my paper in 15th ICCM. The topic of my presentation is Internet of Things in Natural Hazard Management, Current Research and Future Directions. I'm Gajendra Sharma from Kathmandu University, Nepal, and I'm very happy to talk few things about the overall significance of IoT devices that can be frequently used in different types of natural hazards. And my topic of presentation includes few important topics, followed by introduction, concept of IoT, challenges of applying IoT, then it includes priorities during disaster, future trend of IoT adoption, and finally, my presentation ends with conclusion. So now this is the basic introduction about the topic. Natural hazards can be proved to be great harm to human being. So natural hazard is the great challenge worldwide nowadays. And some example of hazards may be earthquake, landslide, storms, floods, and so on. And the disasters cannot be prevented immediately, but by a careful planning and emergency steps, the consequences of disasters can be minimized. And in this case, the Internet of Things plays a very important role in disaster management and preparation. So IoT is one of the innovations of information and communication technology. So IoT is the part of ICT that can be widely used in disaster management. So this is a simple chart about the global occurrences of technological disasters during 1990 to 2020. So China is more prone to disasters, having 961 disasters in almost 30 years of time. India, 776 cases. Likewise, Nigeria, USA, Russia, Indonesia, Pakistan, Philippines, Bangladesh, and Egypt. So majority of countries have great challenges to cope with different types of natural disasters. So this is the great challenge to every countries. Now this figure highlights the data input and output using IoT. Sensors are very important devices that can detect the disaster signals or hazard signals, queries to data sources, data creation, calculated data, and alarms. Alarms basically gives special sounds to detect the hazards, which helps to prevent human life in different disaster cases. And this figure is about components of an IoT solution. For example, it includes three important parts: edge, network, and core. Edge is followed by cloud, fog, different type of equipment and devices, and one of them sensor is very important. Network includes different types of internal protocols, wireless channels, SIM cards, and so on. Core includes workflows, operation, data analysis, and storage. So IoT has different components to accomplish the job more effectively. And there are different concepts of IoTs nowadays. For example, IoT is interconnection of things, means different types of equipments or devices that helps to detect disasters. Connection of things to the internet. So without internet, IoT cannot work. Sensing and actuation capability, embedded intelligence, interoperable communication capacity. So these are different concepts and fundamental parameters for IoT. And this block diagram is about IoT based disaster recovery system classification. For example, it can be classified into four major parts. The first part is service oriented disaster management. Second one is natural disaster management, followed by volcanic disaster management, flood, forest fire, landslide, earthquake, and so on. And man-made disaster management includes urban disaster management, industrial disaster management, and terrorist disaster management. Then fourth one is post-disaster management. So that includes victim localization and positioning. So different categories of disaster can be found globally nowadays. And this is a simple flowchart to show how IoT works. For example, it connects the required sensors to microcontroller, processing the sensor data using microcontroller and immediate circuits, send the parameters that are monitored to the cloud, as well as SMS alerts to the people or in mobile phone, develop an application to read data from a GSM model and to store data to cloud, then plot the values on the graph and send alerts to the people. So these are the simple steps for IoTs so that the disaster signals can be sent from source to destination more effectively and efficiently. And there are different enabling technologies for IoT, for example, sensors, actuators, communication technologies, IoT data, and computing. And entire data received from sensors can be processed using specific tools. And these data are analyzed so that we can forecast or we can we can assume what kind of, let's say, losses may happen during disaster, or we can calculate the amount or quantity of disasters that happen from different types of natural hazards. So these are some important technologies for uh, implementation of IoTs. And this figure is to highlight centralized data connectivity in a smart city concept. So IoT devices can also used in smart city. For example, in the central part we have data center, followed by distribution network, power plants, smart factories, smart buildings, farms, and so on. So IoTs has majority of applications in smart city development as well as in natural hazard management. And this is the device diagram for describing the components of IoT. It includes five major components: IoT applications, IoT devices, IoT protocols, data storage, and finally, data analytics. So, using suitable IoT platform, we can use it in disaster management as well. So, IoT has wider implementations in natural hazard management. And there are four major phases of disaster management: preparedness, response, preparedness again, and mitigation. The four popular phases of disaster management that can be widely used in disaster recovery as well as mitigation. And other scenarios for IoT implementations are disaster preparedness, disaster response, disaster recovery, artificial intelligence. Nowadays, deep learning, machine learning, and quantum computing have wide implementations in disaster management. So these are some different scenarios for natural hazard management that can be widely used using different types of uh, technical tools and devices. And we have different types of challenges of applying IoT. For example, more energy consumption by the devices, integration of IoT with subsystems, privacy and security are major challenges because ICT has security challenges every time. For example, loss of data. Okay, sometimes data can be stolen by some external hackers. Data can be lost by some internal or external factors. So security challenges is always there when we use ICT devices. Then selection of IoT standard is also challenging, and appropriate architecture is needed to implement IoT for natural hazard management. That means a very serious or sensitive resource is needed for IoT adoption in disaster management. And several devices in the IoT are designed for deployment on a huge scale. An excellent example of this is sensors. Also, the adoption of IoT comprises identical appliances that may have similar characteristics. So, this can be considered as one of the challenges of IoT adoption. And there are different factors that may impact on compromising the efforts to secure the IoT. For example, frequent update of the system, immediate password, automation, remote access, and so on. So these are also some challenges of implementing IoTs during natural hazard management. And this figure highlights IoT generic model with privacy and security policies. There are different stages, for example, device or sensors, uh, end user side, and cloud. So every kind of data can be stored in a cloud. Cloud is a metaphor, or let's say collection of servers where we can store sensitive data received from different disaster victimized locations. So privacy and security policies should be formulated by concerned bodies so that every kind of disasters can be monitored and controlled in effective manner. So that means privacy and security challenges are always there in IoT implementations, and the government or responsible organizations should formulate clear policies on privacy and security. And this is the proposed system model for IoT adoption. We have cloud computing uh, infrastructure, EAS node using Raspberry Pi, IoT nodes include virtual machines, and different types of interconnected devices. So a simple technology model can work as a as an IoT system for effective disaster management. And we have to set different priorities during disaster management. For example, we have to understand the disaster risk, what type of risk is happening, strengthening disaster risk governance to manage disaster risk, investing in disaster risk reduction for resilience, and enhancing disaster preparedness for effective response. So, four major priorities are there for natural hazard management. And in this presentation, I have included four major case studies. So that includes use of IoT by different nations, for example, flood risk reduction strategies and the early warning systems for alerting the population in Western Balkans, tsunami hazard assessment in the Pacific Ocean tsunami-centric regions, flood prevention and warning programs in Malaysia, system of individualized rescue in Russia. So these are four popular examples of IoT implementations in natural hazard management by different countries. And future trend of IoT implementation may focus on use of blockchain and IoT and formulation of green IoT. So that means IoT systems uh, should contain privacy and security, and it should be more trustable by general people or by user. And blockchain is followed by machine learning, deep learning, and so on. And big data and IoT has very close connection to minimize disaster risk happening in different locations worldwide. Now, the major conclusion of my presentation is that by applying data analytics and artificial intelligence, IoT-enabled disaster management systems are used for early warning during disaster, appropriate actions at every stage of the disaster management cycle ensures better preparedness, improved and reliable early warnings, reduced vulnerability or mitigation of the disaster impact during the subsequent recursion of the cycle. Thank you very much for your kind attention, and thank you very much for organizing committee providing me this opportunity to speak a few words in 15th ICCM. Thank you again. Namaste and goodbye. Have a very nice day.
Negative effects of society on biosecurity and some issues on policy to prevent. Department of Humanities, Public Administration, Senior Lecturer Iot. Negative effects of society on biosecurity and some issues on policy to prevent. Biological hazards caused by the intentional or unintentional human activities or natural factors that can kill millions of people. It is dangerous phenomenon that can cause billions in economic damage and negative consequences for a society capable of creating political and economic sustainability. It is a dangerous phenomenon that can cause billions in economic damage and negative consequences for a society capable of creating political and economic stability. This threat can be caused by factors such as global traffic, urbanization, and interest of the subversive groups to take up arms of mass destruction and technological advances, the creation of new or developed pathogens capable of spreading the plague. Scope of biosafety. Biosafety includes food security, zoonosis, animal and plant disease, pests, GMOs, and their products, and the management of different species. So it is important for agricultural sustainability, human health, and environment, including a comprehensive understanding of biodiversity conservation, If this comprehensive understanding is not managed in the right strategy and in the right way, it will not only cause great harm to the country, society, and economy, but also have catastrophic consequences that could adversely affect national security. Experts and researchers have defined the scope of biosafety as follows. These include food safety. Imported and domestically produced food is an important part of biosafety and determining food safety. Food safety, which is an important part of biosafety, should be monitored for biological and chemical origin of imported, domestically produced and exported food. Recently, many countries have been moving towards improving the control of exporting countries rather than relying on the border control of importing countries. A clear example of the risk of food insecurity is coronavirus infection. At present, the Chinese side claims that the virus has spread due to the use of bats in food, which reveals the disadvantages of using unproven food in wildlife organs. Plant health. Unhealthy farming and infectious plant diseases are biological factors that can cause the spread of pests. Unsustainable farming and infectious plant diseases are biological factors in the formation and spread of pests. GMOs, these organisms created with the latest biotechnology to destroy weeds, and weeds may in turn upset ecological balance and destroy biodiversity. Prioritize activities. The Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations recommends that the government prioritize biosafety the following ways. It defines biosafety capabilities in 7 steps. First step, provide decision makers with real and scientifically sound information on biosafety and gain their support by raising awareness of its harm. Second step, decision makers and stakeholders agree on national biosafety goals, scope, and processes. Third step, introduce biosafety plants across the world, across the country, and conduct risk analysis. At this stage, a systematic review and analysis of biosafety will be conducted to identify the core normative and functional capabilities of the sector. Organization to ensure biosafety based on the industry and the organizational risk analysis will be able to monitor performance and identify and improve needs. Fourth step, assess current biosafety capacity and performance. In third step and fourth, it is important to identify the current state of biosafety capacity and performance, and to understand this, to accurately identify needs, and to enhance and strengthen the capacity to see the local situation fully. Fifth step, identify future biosafety goals with objectives and objectives. Following the current capacity assessment, future biosafety goals will be identified through discussions, debates, and explorations involving biosafety stakeholders and authorities. This may include industry, research, or scientific institutes. Examples include Norway and New Zealand, which have integrated systems for managing biosafety risks to the economy, the environment, and human health. New Zealanders have a good understanding of their biosafety systems, so they believe in their biosafety because they play an important role in everything from border control to pest management, he said. Sixth step, identify the capacity needed to achieve future goals. This requires careful identification of the interrelationships between human, animal, and plant life, health, the environment, minimizing the overlap of the activities, and identifying strengths and opportunities. In doing so, it is important to distinguish between what is important and what we want, so that we can focus on the areas, resources, and capabilities that we consider most important. And seventh step, develop options to build the capacity. At this stage, in order to achieve the desired biosafety conditions, we will look for options to determine which activities are more effective in terms of time, legal, efficiency, cost, and resources. In general, 6th and 7th steps focus on diagnosing, analyzing, and developing appropriate options. Once the capacity has been assessed and these needs identified, the government will prioritize and organize its work, improve the use of available resource, and create additional resource for unmet needs. Hazard and risk assessment. Biosafety risk assessment is generally understood to mean that the government agrees on ways to control it in consultation with stakeholders. In other words, the government will take appropriate control measures with measures based on scientifically sound information that may endanger the health and lives of others without compromising the legitimate values of the parties. Experts also believe that risk management should include possible safeguards that take into account the nature of the source of the problem and other factors that may affect it, as well as a more general level of protection to control the problem. The World Health Organization has issued guidelines for GMOs. Today, the area under genetically modified crops in the world has increased 60 times in the last 10 years, reaching 110 million hectares. The world has a different approach to the inclusion of the information on the SRC label. Countries such as the United States, Canada, and Argentina do not require addressing but the European Union has 0.9% threshold, while Russia has tightened the 5% threshold from 2007 to 0.9% in line with the EU standards. Japan and Australia have a 5% limit. Products containing genetically modified organisms may pose the following risks to the human health. 1. Transmitted proteins weaken the immune system and provoke allergies. The effects of previously unused genes containing mutated genes are unclear. In Switzerland, where genetically modified products are banned, 7% of the population is allergic, while in the United States, where food is allowed, 70.5% of the population has allergies. Newly formed proteins are more likely to release toxic compounds during their degradation. 3. Antibiotics. Antibiotic-resistant microorganisms are formed in the human gut. Of biosafety on society, some prevention and policy issues. 1. The Parliament of Mongolia to improve the legal environment to regulate all types of relations related to the ensured biosafety, strengthen the control, increase the role and responsibility of stakeholders, and support the introduction of biotechnology, nanotechnology, and research results into tool production. 2. To the government, 1. Develop, approve and implement a national program with a comprehensive long-term policy on biosafety. Summary. Experts believe that there is an urgent need to strengthen biosafety, reduce the biological risks caused by technological advances, create new ways to improve the surveillance of communicable diseases, strengthen biosafety to a measurable level, and identify its shortcomings and gaps. This is not just a matter for the government, but also for the public-private partnership. In order to have a national capacity for biosafety, the entire process of identifying and correcting gaps in legislation, implementation, and monitoring must be followed in a detailed sequence of actions. In this order, countries can define their capabilities so that they do not make mistakes in biosafety. COVID-19, which has caused billions of economic losses around the world, reminds humanity of the importance of biosafety, and that it is more effective and less costly to prevent than to take action after a threat. Thanks for paying attention.